I'm going to go ahead and call us to order and declare we have a quorum of 6 members present. And that takes us to item C1, consideration, discussion, possible action related to board operating procedures. Dr. Ely.
Mr. President, members of the board, I do just want to apologize for the state of my voice. The constant back and forth between the wind going from the north to the south has I'm finally claimed a victim to that. So I'm losing my voice, but I will endeavor to work through that. Item C1 is talking about board operating procedures. As you are all aware, this is the operating procedures that the board and senior leadership work through. It's kind of a compact with ourselves as to how we do business. Much of that is stated in local board policy, but then there's other issues in the board operating procedures that kind of talk about how we communicate with the media and go visit campuses and those types of things. We had a discussion regarding it last month, and we made some changes. And what we have for you today is I'd like to summarize the changes that we made based on feedback that we had at our January board workshop. So if you would, that you already have a copy of this at your place. That should be the second or third thing in your pile there. If you would skip to page 7, that will be the first change that we had from our previous board operating procedures. Going to the second section, which says constituent phone calls, letters, and or electronic communication with the board. We added a bullet on top of the second one was the first one. We added the first one there. Confidentiality will be maintained to the extent permitted by state and federal law. We had a rich discussion about anonymous and confidentiality, and it was the board's desire that we put something in there about that we must be controlled by state and federal law regarding confidentiality. So we started with that. And then we discussed the concept of anonymous calls and letters. So the College Station ISD Board of Trustees encourages input. However, anonymous calls, letters, and or electronic communications will not receive board attention, discussion, or response, and will not result in directives to the administration. Confidentiality is strictly maintained when possible. So that was reflective, I believe, of the conversation that we had last month. So if there's something that jumps out at you we need to change, please let me know. Okay. As far as keeping things congruent throughout the document, when we refer to Mrs. Horn as the executive assistant and clerk to the board, we had lots of things in there: executive assistant, clerk, secretary. So if you look under constituent conduct during board meetings, the first big bullet and the first small bullet under the big bullet, third line, executive assistant, parenthetically clerk to the board. We've just updated that as we've gone through the document and made that change. You'll see that as you get to the 5th from the bottom on page 7 as well. We've made that change there. Flipping to page 8, we've made that change as well during the part where the board president reads introductory remarks before the public. So we made that change there. Moving on to page 12. Third big bullet down, executive closed sessions. The first bullet under that, closed session agenda items. We updated the Texas Education Code and made the right notation that the executive sessions are controlled by the Texas Government Code rather than the Texas Education Code. So we made that change there on page 12. And then the last ones are on page 14, the last page of the document. Under board development, evaluation of the board at the top of the page, the first bullet, it said that in the winter of the year, we were going to evaluate our board superintendent team, change that from winter to annually, because sometimes we don't always get to it in the winter. So we want to make sure that we are doing that annually. That second bullet, evaluation of the board and superintendent, the first small bullet under that, in a workshop meeting, the board reviews and revises annually the core beliefs and commitments. We took out months because it's stipulated 3 months in there. So again, we just took that and give us a little bit more flexibility to annually, and took out the months that were cited in the board policy, in the board operating procedures. So those are all the changes that we had based on our conversation last month. Love to hear any other conversation you have, or any other changes we might want to make. Mr. Harris.
Okay, on page 12, that third bullet point, where you changed Education Code to Government Code,
Yes.
should open for Open Meetings Act be capitalized?
I thought we got all those. Yes, it should be. We went on capitalization fest to try to make sure that we missed one. Sorry.
That's okay.
Maybe not one, maybe
I'm
more than one.
afflicted by that. I get it. That's all I had. Other than that, I think it captures what we talked about.
If that's the case, we'd be looking for approval of this with the noted change for capitalizing open on page 12.
You're looking for a motion?
We are looking for it now.
I would move that we approve board operating procedures as changed and presented,
Second.
including the capital O for open.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That takes us to item C2. Consideration and discussion related to board policy FMG local regarding student travel. This item is on our agenda at the request of Mrs. Green, based on some constituent feedback. Before we get into it, is there anything you want to say or give us some background?
Sure. FMG is a local policy that was last updated in 2014. It controls student activities and travel for various student activities. What we have been talking about in the past, we're talking about band, drill team, choir, cheerleaders, pep squad, those types of things. This has been a longstanding policy in the district to where that travel has been limited to high school aged competitive groups like these. We made the change in 2014, and we made two big changes in the policy at that time. One was it moved from every 4 years to every 2 years for these groups to be eligible to go for out-of-state travel. And we added in athletic teams, because prior to that, there were no athletic teams, were not a part of this policy. So that's been the change that happened almost 5 years ago, and that's the last update that we have had to it. And so you all have a copy of the two-page policy in front of you, and then we also have it up on the screen. Really, I think what is of issue is the first part, talking about who is eligible and how often and those types of things. So,
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question on the, I'm just curious, we went from 4 years to 2 years. What was the determining factor? Like, why not every year? I'm just curious. Would you be eligible?
So this was primarily for those band, drill team, and cheerleader groups that would take one big trip every
Right.
4 years. So you got to go on a trip once during your high school years, whether it's your sophomore year or your senior year, freshman year, or whatever. And I will have to admit that was quite a while ago. I don't exactly know why we went to 2, other than I think it gave the competitive perhaps athletic teams more of an opportunity to go a little bit more often. That's my recollection, but I honestly, I don't remember.
I'll give you my recollection
Okay.
too. Don't think that it's necessarily accurate, but I think when we started introducing the athletic teams, it's very possible that a kid could say get there his freshman year and the varsity takes a trip somewhere like this. Well, then they wouldn't be up for 4 more years. Well, that freshman maybe didn't make varsity, so then they wouldn't have that opportunity while they were in high school. At least that's my recollection. So we
Because
went for
if you're in the
2.
band or if you're in the drill team, you're usually there for 4 years, so you would get that opportunity during the 4 years time span.
And CSHS baseball, I think, had
I think they were the first.
the first that had,
An out-of-state,
yeah.
like, competition?
And
right.
I think that was the thinking. Now, again, don't hold me to that. That's been a while ago.
Okay.
Thoughts?
This, we have it here as a discussion item only. There's no action this evening, so just love to hear what y'all are thinking.
So when they travel out of state, does the district pay for that travel, or is it?
No.
Do they fundraise and pay for it themselves?
No, sir. If you look on the what is it, second page, it's in here somewhere. The district funds will not be used for the students or for non-CSISD personnel. I'm looking for this. Thank you. No district funds. District operating funds shall not be used to pay any expenses connected with the trip for students or non-district personnel. The performing/competition group or school-affiliated booster organization shall be responsible for paying the expenses of the district personnel. Third to the last paragraph.
So in theory, I think there's two things to the policy to maybe discuss, is the age, because we have a request from the middle school to be able to be eligible to go to out-of-state competitions. And then two, I think there's an opportunity to look at why every 2 years, right? So if it's not district funded, why, if you're eligible for a certain competition or, you win something. And I see here that you have discretion, right? For like the Rose Bowl and those types of things that, maybe the drill teams go to. But why would we, I guess I don't understand why it would be every 2 years. Why couldn't it be every year?
Well, I would say, yeah, if we looked at going to middle school, you would pretty much have to go to every year, right?
Yeah.
Or you hope you hit it right.
Right.
I think, okay, if we go to middle school, why not intermediate school? Why not elementary school? To me, those are the questions. And then you get into, this is a delicate balance. Most of y'all, don't know if you've lived it yet, Ms. Nolan, but I know the rest of us have, where the fundraising and how you balance extracurricular activities and the enhancement and enrichment they can provide with core mission of schools. To me, that's your trade-off. And I think traditionally the policy has been high school because to save something for the higher levels. To me, the one thing that was hard for me to get used to a little bit was there are no playoffs, no matter how good your freshman team does.
Yep.
Or JV team. It's done. And you start, okay, why? Well, it's because it's getting those guys ready for varsity or those girls. I don't know. That's kind of where we are. And is it worth that to us? I don't know. I'm interested in your thoughts on it. To me, there's definitely a mixed bag. I see the advantages for having kids have opportunities, but I also see downsides, and I feel like, okay, my next question is, do we do it intermediate? Why draw the line at middle school? What's the distinguishing factor between middle school and intermediate? Well, if we're at intermediate, why not elementary? I'm asking questions. I'm not giving answers. Thoughts?
Well, if it's at no cost to the district, I'm not sure why we limit it at all. And this is first time I've paid attention to this policy because it's on our agenda. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I get it or not, but
Because I think it's not just for sports, right? It's for all like
For all,
robotics.
right.
It could be art. It could be whatever type of new competitions come out there. Do we want to limit if it's no cost to the district? I guess this is just a unique opportunity that they had gotten into.
So I think
Wellborn.
when you look at these trips, they involve a significant amount of fundraising that's involved, and many of these groups have to do fundraising in and of themselves to be able to do the things that they need to do annually. But these trips, as I said, have significant amount of fundraising and a significant amount of parent participation as well. because you could just write the check, or you could have your child do some of the fundraising, or both, to be able to pay for these trips. The more often that they occur, could perhaps be a impediment to some of those in our district who don't have the financial means that others do. You could always say, well, they have the opportunity to do the fundraising, but that's a significant amount of time that's involved in the fundraising as well. So perhaps that should be something that should be a part of the equation, at least to be thought about.
I think that's a good point. I got two on that. One, fundraising is a real commitment, and that's why I don't know if you've been through that yet, but
Have not.
I know the coaches are always, and directors are always in search of funding, and those are real demands. But you did hit on one thing, and I think it would be something we'd have to carefully monitor, or at least have pretty good discussions on. When I was fairly new to the board, I had someone come to me and say, why am I having to pay $350 so that the daughter of someone that works in my office can participate in cheer at middle school? And I may have that exact number wrong. But this individual had someone in their office whose daughter wanted to do cheer. I think it was AMCMS at the time. And, well, they couldn't afford it, but so the parent was distraught, and this individual said, don't worry about it. I'll make sure it happens. And I think that's a real issue that we should at least address. And I know fundraising is there, but does it raise the bar for participation to a point that we start excluding people?
So I hadn't really thought about that too terribly much yet, since I haven't experienced it yet. But having, a 12-year-old and a 13-year-old, I did think about, and I'm looking at the chaperone part of this. And so one adult chaperone for every 10 students. So assume that a middle school student does raise the funds. This all went through, and they raised the funds and stuff, and then they were able to go, but their parents were not able to go as well. Is this something that we are comfortable signing off on, saying, sure, we'll, send 12 to 14-year-old kids to another state with other chaperones? I guess that's at the discretion of the parents, really. So maybe it's a moot point, but that was just a thought that I had. Having kids in that age bracket.
It sounds like there's a pretty rigorous vetting process. You don't just get to say, you know what I mean? Like, there's proposals that have to be made, considerations, your approval, and just having a child that's, participate, now not out of state, but, has traveled. It's a pretty well-oiled, machine. I think in respect to this policy, it is, the request was brought, can we extend the age? And then I guess my question is, why are we limiting it every 2 years? I know we need to think other factors, but it sounds like there are pieces of that in play for that approval process, right? So if this were to come about, there was fundraising, the proposed plan, right? We definitely don't want to propose anything that would exclude anyone. But it sounds like when there are opportunities, these don't obviously pop up every year either. Out of state. Usually, Texas, it's within the state. So, but I don't know. It's an interesting topic, I guess, one I hadn't thought of. I guess I didn't realize that we had an out-of-state policy. But yeah, I don't know.
I guess one of the things that we would need to think about is 12 to 14 years old. Is that the right age to be going out of state for a few days, potentially with people who are not your parents? Are we okay with that or not? Is it better off if it's 15 to 18 years old at the high school level? I guess just I would hate for us to set up something that has the potential to be of has versus have-nots. So with those that have the ability to be able to do that type of travel, being able to make that commitment a lot more easily, and those commitments versus others maybe in the district that don't have that ability. Those are just my thoughts, but many others as well.
And kind of following that train of thought, I mean, so this is the age where we definitely want kids to try things, right? Like, just try it out. And maybe I'm chasing a rabbit here, but what if the possibility of having to fundraise because this organization might go out of state or if that would, deter a kid from even trying, knowing that that's just really, it would be really a burden on their family. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I might just be chasing something that, I don't know. Having a 12 to 14-year-old, this age bracket worries me, sending kids out of state. Just gives me pause, major pause.
At this age group, how many other possible, I mean, I wasn't even aware there was a national competition for middle school. I mean, no, I'm really not trying to be ugly or dismissive at all, but I didn't have a middle school cheerleader, so I didn't know this was even a thing. But, I mean, obviously, we know the basketball and football team, track team, they're not going to go out of state. I mean, Ms. Green mentioned robotics. Is there a national robotics? I mean, I'm just wondering if we open this up, how many other potential groups would this potentially affect? I mean, and that's clear as mud.
Related to that is, how do we define a group?
Well, I actually underlined that. It
7 on
says,
17
yeah, we've got
or-
band, drill team, choir, pep squad, cheerleader, athletic teams, and other groups. I'm like, well, gosh, could we? No, I'm kidding. No, but I'm with you.
I don't know what we could do that well in, but
We could raise so much money.
Mr. Nugent, I don't know, but one of the things that jumps into my mind is 7-on-7. We have kids in this community that play 7-on-7 at the middle school and high school level for local club teams.
Right.
They also play representing their schools in leagues as well. I mean, if they were we to have 7-on-7 groups that qualify, I'm sure there's any number of ability to play all across the nation for 7-on-7 tournaments. I've known some people who've gone with some of these club teams. Is that a group if they're representing AMCMS or CSMS or Wellborn? So you asked one, that's just one that popped into my mind.
Sure.
so this isn't, it's not UIL or any way related to that?
It's not UIL, it's a high school, right?
No.
So how often, I mean, I'm completely oblivious to all this stuff, the high school. How often do high school groups go out of state? I don't even know.
About once every 4 years. I mean, like drill team,
Drill team goes
Choir.
about once every 4 years.
band.
And why do they only go once every 4 years?
As Mr. Harris said, because you get a chance to go once in high school. Because if you're in the drill team, you're usually on it for 4 years. You're in the band, you're usually on it for 4 years. So
But it was changed to every 2 years.
It was, but that's why
it was, but
wondering what the
but
actual-
that doesn't really happen.
Oh, no, I
They have the
understand
opportunity
that.
to do that, but what normally happens,
I wonder what the behavior actually is.
yeah, and that's usually what it is, because it's a significant investment.
Because of the cost, it's easier to do it once every 4 years.
Yes, sir.
Well, I would think
kinda
it's
gear
tough
up
to
for it.
go around a small town like this raising money every year
Right.
to go somewhere.
I mean, we have a crazy supportive community, but are we gonna?
I think any group could compete at Disney World once a year if they wanted to. I think Disney offers, Disney encourages that, so, I mean, I think if you open it up for every year, Disney's gonna invite you.
Now you're picking on Disney.
Well,
Well, no, I mean,
You're not
I
wrong.
mean, he's kind of scratching on the kind of the ugly issue of kid activities that's kind of hard to talk about, quite frankly, and it's the pay to play kind of thing. I mean, do we open ourselves up to anyone who wants to get a group together, go to some other organization, participate, and then, hey, we made nationals, we're going to Disney World? I mean, I think that's kind of the issue that he's raising. And, I don't know. I'd have a little trouble with that because it's one thing when it's outside of school, and if that's what people choose to do and how they want to participate, I think that's fantastic. But when you start sanctioning it by the school, it becomes a little bit different. And then all of a sudden, yeah, they can fundraise. Well, anybody that's fundraised knows there's a limit to the amount in the pot. And if you pull to go one place, well, that's not available then to go somewhere else. It's not dollar for dollar, but it's definitely a real issue. And I don't know. To me, is this age bracket, is it appropriate to include that? I mean, or is it an unusual thing and this was kind of a one-off?
Right.
I don't know. Well, I mean, is there at high school for cheer, what do they compete in? Is there a cheer competition group where they go and get ratings and?
I think there is a cheer competition group in the high school.
Like that's UIL or something?
Okay, so there is a UIL
Well-
spirit competition to which we do not participate in either of the two comprehensive high schools by choice.
And I think too, like looking at the policy, exceptions can be made for those groups that compete in state activities and qualify for out-of-state competitions. So as the way I read it, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, this group qualified at a state level and got a bid to national. So it doesn't sound like any group could go say, hey, I want to go to Disney World. Like they had to have qualified at a certain level to be able to get that, if I'm reading that correctly.
Except the next sentence says out-of-state trips shall be available only for performing groups at the high school.
Right, right.
So,
But I mean,
if-
as far as like getting, if we're worried about opening up the floodgates of out-of-state travel for 12 to 14-year-olds, it's not that they can just say, hey, we decided we want to go to this tournament and out of state. They would have to have qualified at the state level to go. So that's going to put a barrier of out-of-state travel right there. I mean, this is kind of the exception to what we normally do in-state is how I'm reading it.
No, and it doesn't, I guess, really qualify here. In that paragraph, it's talking about state activities. Is it implied that that's UIL because we're talking about high school students specifically here?
I don't know that it implies that it's
Oh,
UIL.
okay. I don't even know if there are non-UIL state activities in high school. I mean, I know in fine arts it's UIL, and so.
TMEA.
So this particular competition and activity that came up, is this something that, I mean, I'm assuming it happened in middle school, and the letter I read says something about it's a high school competition. I mean, is this something that they could qualify for again in a couple of years when they are in high school? I mean,
It depends on what summer cheer camp they go to. So A&M Consolidated Middle School and College Station Middle School have been participating in a different cheer camp, which does not have the opportunity to qualify for state level and national level competition. Welborn Middle School, being a new school, chose a camp to go to that was different than the two current existing schools, and that one just happened to have this opportunity to have a state level and a national level. At this point, I don't know what our cheers, just talking about cheer right now, does for summer camp, whether they have the opportunity to qualify for state and national level events, competitions like this or not. I know that speaking as a father of a drill team member, I know that too, one several years ago, and one now who's finishing her senior year. And in the olden days, back when Ann was in school, they went to a cheer camp out of town. Now we have moved into being more economical by bringing people in and having our own cheer camp or a drill team camp here in town with bringing choreographers in. And so, you know, in the drill team world, I'm not sure where the Strutters are with this, but at least the Bells don't have that opportunity to do that because they're using that camp opportunity to be here in town. So it's a long-winded answer to say that we're kind of don't know. We kind of have different roads.
Right. I'm just wondering if typically, if anything that a middle school child could qualify for, anything at all, any club, group, sport, academic, if that opportunity would then also be available in high school were they to continue, or if this is, a type of thing where this is the only time, only when they're in middle school are they going to have these kinds of opportunities. That's what I'm
Okay.
getting at now. And I think you see where I'm going with that. Where if I mean, it's one thing if this is the only time they're ever going to have that opportunity, this age bracket. But if there's a chance later that if they continue with this and they keep honing their craft or whatever it is, and they have the opportunity again, you know,
I don't know the answer to that question, but that's
Right, I
something
know.
we can bring to the board if you would like.
So you're saying in this specific case, would they have the opportunity in high school to go to a national cheerleading?
well, I mean, if we're
competition?
going
It sounds like.
yeah, I mean, if we're going to
Yeah.
use this
Or-
case
or an
to make a
out-of-state trip,
decision,
yeah?
right, I mean, if we're going to use this case to make a decision eventually, then yes, I mean, I would want to know that.
I think you said that they don't have the opportunity in high school.
I don't know.
Oh, for
That's-
cheerleading.
Yeah, cheerleading. I don't know. I know what the decisions that at least the Bells have made through personal experience.
Okay, gotcha.
So that would be something. I just wrote that little note to
Gotcha.
jog my memory. Something we might need to get.
I feel like a fish out of water with this one, just because
Your time's coming.
I know, but I'm just like, oh, things I hadn't even thought about. And to use the word that my kids say, my middle school kid, it just feels so extra.
I think this was important to raise because I think this is a unique and amazing opportunity that, these girls have worked hard for and their coaches advocating for them for us to take a look at. Is that something that we can modify from a grade standpoint and age standpoint?
So they're hoping we will change this so they can go, or they missed it?
No,
They
sir.
missed
For,
it.
They
yeah,
missed it.
for future
Okay, so
years.
this is
Talking
just
for future years.
Okay. I have literally no opinion on this. I mean, I can see going in both directions. I mean, I think the odds are that we have middle school students wanting to take out-of-state trips in the future is slim. And if their parents are willing to sign off on letting them go, then I'm inclined not to stand in their way of wanting to do that. But at the same time, we've raised a couple issues that I probably would not have thought of had you just walked up to me and said, hey, should we let them go or not? So, I mean, I tend to say if there are student groups that qualify for stuff, we should
Well, wonder
let them go in the whole.
wonder if
But-
we had some kind of case-by-case basis from the junior high standpoint, and I mean, there's a long list of things you gotta do to qualify to go out of state. I mean, I don't know.
So add something in there that
Add something in
adds
there
to
that
the
says, hey,
clerk's ability to
Doesn't hurt to ask.
have to be the good guy or the bad guy. So exceptions can be made for,
So right now, there cannot be an exception based on the way the board policy is written for students under ninth grade.
Right.
Why limit it to middle school?
Right, and I think that's what you get into.
Yep.
that with this presentation or this topic being brought up from the middle school, if something happens, you know, if we did make the decision to make the grade level 7th and 8th grade, something comes up in 5th or 6th, they bring it to the board, we evaluate. I mean, it sounds like this is the first time this has been brought up.
Well, I
imagine.
mean, I can tell you what I do not want to be as a board member is in a position on a frequent basis, having to make a call on whether a junior high group can go. But I certainly don't mind changing this to be a policy that says that kids that are outside of the high school level that want to make a request to the superintendent, it can be your prerogative to allow that to occur or not. I mean, I've got no issue with that, but again, that pushes everything back on that pushes everything back on you, right? I mean, but I certainly don't think we as a board need to be in the business of reviewing whether a junior high group can go on an out-of-state trip. I think that's kind of why we write policies, hopefully.
Right, and this spells out that the administration does all of these things and
Yeah.
goes through this
Right.
approval policy.
Absolutely.
I think the question here is 7th and 8th grade, 12 to 14-year-olds the right age to be able to do this? Yes or no? Or do we, and if we're, Mrs. Green, you mentioned it earlier, I haven't said it much lately, but about doing it every year, is having the ability to go every year, and what that could mean for parents, for students in fundraising. Is that appropriate? That's a policy level, discussion.
Well, and if we say, let's say 8th graders could go every year, or you can say 7th graders and 8th graders can go every year, would it make sense to restrict high school more, or do you say they can go every year?
If you change it for middle school and say it's every year, I think you kind of have to change it for high school. I mean, that's,
No, I agree. I would think you would have no choice but to do that. I'm just trying to think through what that looks like for us.
To me, every year, you just start running into and a potential. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball here, but being on both sides of the fundraising, where I've had kids and we do fundraise for certain things, but then I
you get requests.
have a store in town where I am approached literally every day. And there's a limited amount of funds from me. Now, maybe other places in town aren't limited, but I think they are. And I think at some point, something's going to suffer that is currently whether that's the Tiger Club or the After Prom Bash. There's a fundraiser, believe it or not, even for Chrissy's Closet last week. I mean, I think that it's going to hurt something somewhere. I mean, and I'm thinking if it's every year and all of a sudden you have the baseball team and the cross country team going to Kansas every year. I mean, that's just a lot of money. And I don't want it to hurt. And again, it may not, but I think it's something to consider if it's an annual basis. And I would assume, I wasn't here when the policy was written, but I would assume that was part of it for limiting it. And again, there's only so much funds to go around.
And time. And I could talk about that.
I think the thing that stands out is the qualification piece, right? So they have to qualify, I mean, at that state level to go out of state. So I don't know that it would be every year that would happen.
Well, did the baseball team have to qualify? I mean, I know they were invited. They didn't win state or anything to go do it.
I think they were at a level to where they qualified to go there. I think they performed well enough one year to be invited back.
I know the cross country team went a couple years ago to.
If memory serves me on that. So.
But I think they've been to Oregon and they've been to Kansas. And I don't think there was a qualification to that. I'm trying to think who else has gone.
So.
Qualified doesn't mean you have to win something to be qualified. I mean, sign up and you're willing to pay the money, you qualify.
that's what.
First line is the following policy shall govern out-of-state trips and shall apply to performing/competition groups such as band, drill team. So exceptions can be made for
Right.
those groups that qualify.
Right.
So you are choosing to take a trip every 2 years, 4 years, whatever.
Yeah, I think we'd have to revisit it because, I mean, they don't qualify to go to New York, do they? The Bells? They just go, right?
And so that's it used to be, where is that line? Where it talks about the superintendent or designee may consider making an exception to the rule when performing groups are invited to attend nationally televised events such as Tournament of Roses, Orange Bowl, Macy's Thanksgiving Day, or inaugural parade. And the seniors and the drill teams have traditionally gone to that. They have gone as Bengal Bells and in the past as Strutters, but actually now they don't go representing the school. They go representing the private organization, Spirit of America. And so they actually pay their money to Spirit of America and kind of go on themselves with their parents or however they arrange that. So that's actually not through the school. This is not an action item for today. This is just purely a discussion item. Is there information that you would like the administration to provide the board related to this?
I'd like to know what out-of-state trips our groups have been on in the last, I mean, since at least since 14, I guess, when it changed to every 2 years.
Can we find out a dollar amount? Is that relevant or no?
Well,
I don't know if it is.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of the age, the grade level, sounds like.
How do we investigate kind of what the options are? I mean, if I wanted to start up, let's pick it, 8th grade, 3-on-3 basketball. Is there a group that I can go participate in that has a national level event at Disney? I mean, things like that. I mean, that's what I don't know is, what are we open the door to here? Are we going to bring the pressures that people face outside of school as parents to have their kids participate in activities like that into school at that level?
So we have people all over this community traveling all over America every year. They travel with competitive volleyball, with AAU basketball, with competitive cheer, with competitive dance, through these other organizations not affiliated with the school. And so there is a lot of fundraising and travel and monetary outlay on the behalf of parents going on in the community, but they're all with these outside groups. None of those are through schools, with the exception of what we have that's covered here that has traditionally been at the high school level.
So let me ask you this: I'm assuming when they go on these trips as high school members, they sign waivers that indemnify the school district from liability of some kind, or are we liable legally for when our students go on those kinds of trips?
Well, I'd not in the presence of a school attorney right here. I'd hate to say exactly what
Stay
it
on
would be.
holiday in last night, though.
Yeah, because it's not my bailiwick, but you know, we enjoy. I mean, we have the benefit of some immunities as a public school system, but I believe if you're going and representing the school, there is a certain amount of risk that is involved with that.
So I think it would be interesting to know, or at least make a phone call to see if there are age differences in that liability. So if we have kids sign I'm assuming they have to sign a permission slip or waiver or whatever they sign in high school. is that even possible for kids in middle school, or would that have to look substantially different? Or, I'm not trying to argue one way or the other. It's just an interesting thing to me.
No, it's a good
The notion
word.
is that as a representative of the school, all of a sudden you're going to start traveling as a 12-year-old. I would think the burden on the school becomes higher at that age on the school district than it does with a high schooler. But I could be completely wrong, and anybody that's under 18 is all treated the exact same. I just don't know the answer to that question. So.
Well, I mean, just a thought that's given me, and I'm not trying to argue one way or the other here either. I think every one of us up here, or most of us, we've had children represent our schools, and while not traveling out of state, I don't think any of them have. They've traveled a lot in state, and I mean, I don't remember ever signing anything for that. And I mean, we've done overnight trips. Do we?
Oh, yeah.
We sign for that?
Oh, yeah.
That's my wife's job then.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
When like Port Neches,
Oh, yeah.
lovely Port Neches.
Oh, yeah.
No, I've never seen a waiver, so I bet my wife has.
In the beginning, you sign for not each per trip.
Okay.
I'd be curious to see what some other school districts do. And then the other thing, I would like maybe for you to get some input from, well, whoever you think's appropriate on potential impact on participation if we kind of raise the ante a bit from a cost standpoint. And I don't know. I mean, to me, it's, if I thought it was kind of a one-off, it would be different. Like where, oh my gosh, this team happened to be incredibly good and they just happened to go this far. That's a little different to me than, well, every year this team does it and we're then qualifying every year to go. And so we have an 8th grade trip. That's a little bit different in my mind. And so what that does is it creates an expectation. Well, if you're going to participate, well, we're going to need to have this amount of money, whether you write a check or your parents write a check or you go raise it. And to me, I don't know all those issues, but I'd like for you to get some input and maybe see what people's thoughts are on that.
Anything else?
Well, I'm going to ask it again. I mean, what will our age restriction be and why? Why are we drawing a distinction? Is it just because who asked us? Or is it going to be there's a rational distinction between a 6th grader and a 7th grader or a 5th grader and a 7th grader? I'd like to be able to know the why on that. And I guess you could carry it down to, how about 4th graders? I mean, they do a spelling bee, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It was actually
We do a spelling bee.
my
Right.
daughter actually brought that up today when I was talking to her, and she said, well, can you go out of state for the spelling bee? She's like, maybe I would have tried for that. That actually got brought up at my house.
Okay, so we can get that information and bring it back to you.
I like it. Anything else?
Yeah, it's good.
We good? Okay, item C3, consideration and discussion related to TASB Policy 112.
Mr. President, members of the board, again, talking about board policy, Texas Association of School Boards is our policy consultant, and they bring us from time to time policy updates. Our latest update is update 112, and it's has to do with some of the things still cleaning up from the 2017 legislative session. We anticipate having this on the agenda at the March regular meeting for approval. We've sent you copies of Vantage Points and just use this as an opportunity. As you've read over that, is there something that you have a question on that we need to get you more information on? That's really the purpose of having this item here. Is there any questions you have on any of the board policy updates that you'd be considering next month? Okay. All right, then we look forward to having that on the regular meeting agenda in March.
Okay. Well, with that, we are adjourned.